Hello YouTube, got a Radio Moscow with another beer review for you, as is usual. Going to do another German one for you today, as you might have expected, but this is actually a brewery that's fairly local to me here in Heidelberg, and it's actually quite a prominent sort of regional brewery, this guy in Baden-Württemberg. I've heard good things about some of their beers, so it should be quite interesting to review. So we're going to have a little look at the Privat-Brauerei Schmucker and have a little look at their Doppelbock Dunkel. It's a style of beer that I really like, but I'm interested to try it because I've never tried anything from this brewery yet, so I'm quite interested to do it. And as I say, they've got quite a few different beers, so I'll be looking to review more of those for you over the next little while, and I also have some French and Czech beer that I'll be reviewing for you in the next little bit as well, so stay tuned for that. But as is usual with my beer reviews, I'll take you through a bit of a history of the brewery and tell you a little bit about where it's from, but as I always say, you can go on towards the tasting section of the video if that's all you're interested in. But the Schmucker Brewery was founded in 1780, and it's actually a very strong regional beer brand, as I mentioned, and they operate mainly in the Rhine area, mainly in the Neckar Triangle, which actually encompasses Darmstadt, Heidelberg and Aschaffenburg on the corners, if you like, named after the river that goes through Heidelberg and past Mannheim and things like that, the River Neckar, of course. But they're located in a small town called Mossautal, which is 75 kilometres to the southeast of Frankfurt. But to go back to the origin of the brewery was founded in 1780 by Nikolaus Schönberger, and it was then known as the Hirschfeld Brauerei, although 20 years later the Odenwald, the local forest, and the Black Dry Master, who you can see on the bottle there, they became the symbol of the brewery. And then after Johann Gottlieb Schmucker married into the family who owned the brewery in 1895, the brewery changed its name for the first and last time, becoming the Schmucker Brewery, and at this time the brewery was producing 1500 hectolitres of beer. If we move on to 1958, the brewery became the first brewery in Germany to construct its own sewage treatment plant, and I thought it was quite funny that they mentioned that in the history of their brewery. But over the following 10 years from 1958, the brewery was continually modernised. This included the construction of a multi-storey bottling hall, new fermentation and storage tanks, and a doubling in the capacity of the brew house. And then in 1973 they actually exceeded the 100,000 hectolitre per annum mark, and then 10 years later they exceeded the 150,000 hectolitre per annum mark. So in 1984 the brewery became the first in Germany to be decorated with the Gold Honour Letter for their environmental policies for business and throughout the Odenwald. And in 2001 they also added a completely new fermentation, storage and filter area to the brewery, and this opened in 2002. And then if we move on another 4 years, the brewery actually became a member of the powerful Brau Holding International Group, quite a prominent group in Germany for the more industrial breweries, if you like, for the bigger breweries here. But they actually also host an annual festival in the last week of July every year where you can go along and drink in the tents and try all the different beers and stuff like that. So maybe one time I'll make it back to Germany and give that a try. As I mentioned, the company are actually very environmentally friendly, and they seek environmentally friendly cultivation methods for their hops and all their raw materials, in fact. And they actually say that they check their suppliers rigorously, and they're very proud of the natural beauty of the Odenwald region, and they really work to maintain this. They donate a lot of money to local sort of environmental groups who will go out and keep an eye on the forest and things like that. So a really cool company in that sense. But the brewery also has a guest house and restaurant that you can visit and stay in, and you can also go for tours of the brewery, which are in fact very cheap compared to the other ones I've seen, so really cool in that sense. I'll put the brewery website in the video description for you there, so if you are interested in that, definitely check it out. But just to list the other beers for you here, under the Schmucker name they have the Meisterpils, the Privat Export, the Hefeweizen, which is a Naturtrub one, they have the Weizenbock, the Hefeweizen Dunkel, Crystal Weizen, Hefeweizen alcohol-frei, Weizen Radler, a normal Radler, Keller beer, Märzen, Schwarzbier, this one the Doppelbock Dunkel, they have Rosebock, which I'm going to see if I can get, that one sounded quite interesting, Licht, which is a light beer, and Odenwalder Landbier, which also sounded quite interesting when I was reading about it, and they also have an alcohol-free pils as well. And under different names actually, they also have a land beer that's called Rauchbacher Jokel, and they also have a pils beer that's called Gude, so hopefully maybe I can find those at some point for you. I don't know why these guys are sold under different names, maybe acquisitions of the brewery at certain points in the history. But let's move on to the tasting of this beer itself, in fact, and I'm quite looking forward to trying this guy. I quite fancy a beer, and then I'll watch some Sons of Anarchy or something here. But just to tell you a little bit about this beer itself, it's an 8% Doppelbock beer, and it said on the website that most of their ingredients are locally sourced and from the Hallertau and Tettnanger regions, of course, very famous for their hops here. But I'll bring up the camera, let you have a little closer look at the bottle there. You can see the Dry Master there. the brewmaster, of course, there, I think, and you can just see it on there. As I mentioned, this became the symbol of the brewery 20 years after its inception there, so quite cool actually. And he's on the bottle cap as well there, and you can just see the top label of it there. It says here, I'm not actually sure, it just says made with pure Odenwalder water, of course, I think, on this little guy here. So quite cool in that sense. Quite a nice bottle actually, nicely presented, and it says on the back, of course, 8% volume, Doppelbock Dunkel, Schmucker Speciality, all the usual stuff here. It's made fresh with good taste character and things like that, so quite an interesting one. But let's open this guy up and get on with the tasting here. A nice little bit of smoke on the opening there. Let's get this guy out and we'll see how we get on. Really nice sort of dark mahogany colour there. Developing a nice little bit of head actually. I'll try and get it to kind of come out with a bit more of an aggressive pour, but actually I maybe just didn't pour that very well in fact. But yeah, you can see there's a nice sort of tan off-white head. It's quite a bubbly head more than anything, but I think I didn't pour it very well this time actually, and it should probably be a finger. The Germans like their heads to be sort of kind of just coming out of the glass like that. You can apparently send your beer back if it doesn't come like that in Germany, which I didn't know. But you can see it's a nice dark mahogany colour. If I hold it up to the light actually, it's got some nice red tinges to it as well. Really nice looking Doppelbock beer actually. A lot of carbonation actually visible near the head on this one, rushing to the top. On the lower part of the body, not so visible, but it's a really nice looking Doppelbock anyway. A nice mahogany colour here. But in terms of the aroma, very, very roasted in character, I would say. Big malty actually. It's quite a sweet roasted character, to be honest. But you can pick up the a little bit of the sort of red and berry fruit that you would expect from the Doppelbock, in fact. But a nice sort of sweet bready character coming out with this one. But it's actually the caramel element that's coming out with this guy. The brown sugar is actually quite dark, I think. But some nice dark fruits there. It's quite a simple one. It's not actually a very strong aroma for a Doppelbock, I would say. Mainly a malty one, but there is just a little hint of fruit in there. And as I say, it's a sort of dark caramel I'm mainly picking up from this one. Not really picking up too much of a bready aroma from it, but like I say, the aroma for this one isn't too pungent, and I would say. But let's give this guy a taste and see how we get on. As expected, a lot of malt in the flavour here. That's kind of a trademark of the style though, of course. But a big roasted bready opening. It actually reminds me a little bit of the Estonian rye bread and things like that, but maybe a rye bread opening. But yeah, it's got a big roasted character that kind of sits on the middle of the tongue. Yeah, the roasted character with this guy is actually quite dark, and it sort of sits in the middle of the tongue. It's almost a coffee like roasted character to this guy, and then the caramel sort of coming out on the more extremities of the tongue. The malt base in this one's actually quite nice. But yeah, it's interesting that way the flavour sort of splits across the tongue, I would say. It kind of makes it seem like a darker caramel, as the aroma was kind of pointing to, but definitely it's a sort of mix of a kind of roasted coffee one with some nice caramel done in there. It's actually quite well done, I would say, the malt base. But you've got the darker fruits coming out after that. They're not too sweet, in fact, just a little bit of plums. It's quite a subtle fruit character that comes out in the hoppiness. But I'm actually thinking with this one, the sort of caramel, the coffee and caramel mix brings out a little bit of bitterness, I would say. It brings it out quite well in the flavour of this guy. But yeah, the fruit isn't too sharp. It's quite a nice fruity sweetness to it, but it really isn't too sharp as you sometimes get with certain Doppelbocks. But it's a really nice one. Obviously, maybe it just means the oxidation hasn't gone too much, because the fruit comes out a little bit more with greater oxidation, of course, but the fruit is quite subtle, and it just adds a nice little sort of a come down from the malty base, if you like. And then on the aftertaste with this one, I would say You're getting a good little bit of sweetness from the caramel again. Yeah, you're getting the fruit, definitely. The fruit's coming out a little bit more in the aftertaste, I would say, with the kind of nice, a little bit of the sweetness in there from the caramel actually. But as I mentioned, the caramel is kind of quite dark, but it becomes a little bit sweeter as you go through the beer. It's an interesting Doppelbock, this one. But yeah, that malt base is actually quite well done in this one. I think it's quite an enjoyable Doppelbock in my opinion. It's got a nice little bit of alcohol and warmth. In terms of the mouthfeel, definitely a sort of full body beer, and I'm sitting talking to you now and I can feel the alcohol warmth just in here, but it's actually quite well done. This is what you would expect from an 8% beer though. It's a little fizzier than I've had Doppelbocks before actually, but at the same time it is quite a smooth one, and it does have a really good bit of alcohol warmth to it. It's quite nice in that sense. A good winter beer, this one, I would say, and definitely full bodied. It's quite a wet one, I would say. It's not more of a creamy Doppelbock. It's more of, this one is actually quite a wet for a Doppelbock, which is quite interesting. So I mean, this is a nice Doppelbock. I would highly recommend, if you get the chance, give it a try and see what you think. I mean, obviously you have your names in Doppelbock beers, like Andex and things like that, for example, but this guy offers something a little bit different. Andex is a really good beer. I think this one is really well done. Whether it knocks Andex, I don't know. That's beer is subjective, you know, but I think this is a really interesting one. If you fancy something a little bit different from the more prominent names in Doppelbocks, if you like, give this guy a try. I think it's very, very well done, in fact. So it's always interesting to try new beers from new breweries and stuff in styles that you like and just see how it varies up. And I think this guy does a pretty good job. I would recommend that you take a little look at the Schmucker Brewery. And as I mentioned, they've got a huge range of different beers you can go and try, and hopefully I can review more of those over my time in Germany, of course. And going by this guy, if their other beers are up to the same standard, you know, it's some good beer that they're producing. But thanks again for watching my beer reviews. I hope you found this guy informative. I recommend that you check out the Schmucker Brewery. I'm quite impressed with this actually, and hopefully their other beers are the same, in fact. So let me know in the comment section if you do happen to have tried this beer yourself and what you think about it in comparison to other Doppelbocks. It's always interesting to hear that. Give it a try if you get the chance. As I mentioned, the brewery website is in the video description there, but please like, subscribe, share, all of the usual YouTube stuff. Thanks for your continued support of my YouTube channel. Hopefully you've enjoyed this beer review, and there'll be plenty more German beer reviews to come. Cheers.